Hello everybody! Even if you do not look at the title of the video, you can understand which deck I'm going to talk about today. This is Erhnamgeddon. Erhnamgeddon and Armageddon. As you understand, this is one of the old decks. This is one of the classic decks that was actually still around in the old school days. Probably in 1994 or maybe in 1995, I don't remember exactly when this deck originated as a high-power tournament deck. But still, people actually knew about it, unlike the, for instance, ATOG deck that was a more recent invention. So, I decided to go with a 3-color build. I wanted to build this deck for a long time. Now that I have got the necessary duals, I could add the blue splash, not only for the power, but also for other cards you're going to see. Also, I have got the Black Lotus, as you know. So finally I felt that it's time to go with this deck. And I played this deck in a French tournament, in the French Old School online tournament, which I'm really happy about, because it allowed me to take a look at another part of the international Magic community. They have their special rules, which I'm going to talk about at the end of the video. But first of all, let's talk about the deck itself. So, I did not want to take any particular deck list. I wanted to include the staples, of course, but I wanted to build the deck in the way that I saw it, and maybe this is why I did not actually take a really good place. I won 3 matches, I lost 3 matches. Even in the matches that I lost, I typically won a game, but still I could have done better. Anyway, I don't feel bad about it. That was a nice experience. First of all, let's talk about the mana base. We haven't got a lot of basics. We have got 2 islands because I want to cast power cards early. We have got the plains because for white cards I don't really have any early game cards I usually want to cast. Forests, however, I want to have a turn 1 bird or maybe a turn 1 sylvan library, so that's why there are more white sources. 2 tropicals, a play set of savannas because still green and white are the main cards. Colors here. We can say we've got a playset of tundras. We've got the library. With this particular deck, I cannot say that I was able to use it often, but you know, it is always nice to start a game with this card in hand, especially if you're going second. Well, there can be some nice things with it. 4 cities of brass. This is definitely necessary here. And also Moxen, especially important because we are going to cast Armageddon as soon as possible. 1 strip mine as per French rules. Once again, I'm going to talk about the French rules a little bit later. Then we have got the necessary additions, the blue pieces of power. I decided to go against Time Twister because Time Twister may give our opponent the lands that they actually need after me casting Armageddon, so it's not what I wanted to do. Time Twister is not an auto-include in any way. However, green is an auto-include. I mean that Sylvan Library is an auto-include with green. So that's why I have got 3 copies. Birds of Paradise. I sometimes feel bad about not including Birds of Paradise in my decks. Very often I would go with maybe Llanowar Elves or maybe nothing at all. Even though I understand that Mandorks are important, and I also understand that they act as a magnet for removal. You know, the famous ball the bird proverb, so to say, saying. And here, especially since I had 3 different colors and I wanted to be able to still have mana after casting Armageddon, this was definitely relevant. As you can see in my deck, I went against using Felver Stone, which is a popular card here, and I did not really feel a disadvantage because of that. I also had a Soul Ring and I also had a Black Lotus, of course. So I couldn't say that I was ever deprived of any particular colors, and that led to a game loss. There is one more restricted card, Balance. I think that I finally start understanding how to play this card. In one of the matches that I was playing, I was able to cast it turn 1, and I managed to make my opponent discard a lot of cards, discard to 4 I think, and even though I had to sacrifice a land, and of course you understand there are many ways that balance can be used. Once again, it's a really busted card, and the fact that it was reprinted and revised made this card extremely cheap for what it does, actually. This could definitely have been one of the power cards if it had not been printed in the later sets, if it had been a part of a restricted list. I actually would say that this might have been more powerful than Time Twister. Even, you know, with all of these drawbacks, it's still an incredibly powerful card. Next we have got Armageddon. I decided to include 3 copies. Some people say that maybe only 2 copies would be enough, but 3 copies is good for me. I also have one in the sideboard. We're going to talk about the sideboard a little bit later. But I feel it was the right decision, as you understand. Well, actually that's not how we should do that. This one goes to the sideboard. These really stand out. These really stand out. The 4th edition. Oh, I'm sorry, this is actually the 5th edition. Yeah, the 5th edition especially really stands out here. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that Armageddon, yes, incredibly important. Cast as soon as you can. Maybe even if your opponent has 2 lands, if you see that they are mana screwed, color screwed. Armageddon is such a good card. I always loved it. I used it a lot in White Weenie. In this deck it is even better. So, Erhnamgeddons. The more I use them, the more I understand how powerful they are. I played a lot of Burnham, the red and green deck, where Erhnam is the most important, the biggest creature. So here we're actually able to neutralize the drawback of Erhnamgeddon by using Armageddon. So I'm not going to discuss this card any further. You know how powerful it is. It is splashable. It has 5 power. I mean, it has 5 toughness, 4 power. Which makes it stand up to the most powerful creatures in the format very often. We've got a playset of swords. Maybe that is a little bit too much, but I feel that it's okay. We have got another restricted card, which is Regrowth. I did not really figure out whether Regrowth would be a good card here. I mean, sometimes I sided it out. I definitely like Regrowth when I have got a lot of incredibly important restricted cards. So of course I could use this with the power cards. I absolutely adore Regrowth in decks with red. That sometimes guarantees you instant win by picking up your lightning bolt from your graveyard, and so yeah, it wasn't maybe the best card. I just didn't have any situations where I was able to use it to my major advantage. Here we have got Disenchants. 3 of them, 1 more is in the sideboard. No comment here, this is a must for white. Then we have got a card I really wanted to talk about. Now, Serendipity, as you know, is a staple. It has become one of the most popular cards, one of the most popular creatures in old school. Just in general, not only in blue, I can say that this is one of the top 5 old school creatures nowadays. And I really don't feel that I like this card a lot, and maybe you can say that I'm being unprofessional because of this, because this is definitely a good spike card, but there are so many situations where you have got a stalemate. There are so many situations where I cannot really attack with this card. My opponent puts Spirit Link on him, which is incredibly humiliating because I know I have done that myself, putting Spirit Link on my opponent's Serendipity, and sometimes Serendipity was actually killing me. I mean, there are so many situations where this is not an ideal card. I mean, the drawback, you really feel this drawback. Unlike Jusam Jin, which is incredibly powerful and typically unstoppable, this one can easily be stopped with your opponent's Gear or even another Serendipity. So I'm not entirely sure about that. This may have been a better card if you have got maybe more removal, if you're playing a control deck, if you're playing counter burn, and it's all about tempo, you can race your opponent easily. But the good thing is that people were usually afraid of it, sometimes even so people double bolting it, so well, it's definitely a powerful card. Just wanted to say that I have not been able to feel its power, I have not been able to feel that this is definitely the card I need, and sometimes it led to some unpleasant situations. Azure Drake is a card I'm really happy about. I really am happy to see this card more and more often. I was a fan of this card a long time ago, and I will not stop saying that I absolutely love these old school cards that have perfect synergy of the frame and the art itself. So the picture itself, you can feel that it forms a unique new picture with the frame. It's definitely amazing. You've got all of these tones. You have got blue, you have got dark blue, navy blue if you wish. You have got the azure color itself, if you wish we can call that, and the different darker shades of blue. So this is perfect. So if only for the art, I'm definitely happy to see this card. It is bolt proof, which is incredibly important. It can stop, again, Serendips. It can stop a lot of flyers, hypnotic specters. It can also attack, let's not forget about that, so flying is a nice one. Here, of course, we can say that Ghost Ship is strictly better in decks where blue is a little bit more prevalent, but this is definitely not the case with this deck, so even though I could have usually casted this Ghost Ship with 2 blue, it's not that I would often have 3 blue for a generation, so decided to go with this one. I'm really happy about including this one. Actually, he helps me much more often than, let's say, Serendip Ifrit. And finally, we have got Sarah Angel, no comment here. Probably I should have included 3 copies instead of only 2. This is my favorite powerhouse old school magic creature. I am still entirely sure that this is one of the best cards in old school magic when we talk about creatures. Let us also talk about a sideboard. I have already mentioned Armageddon. There are a couple of divine offerings. I'm really afraid of Mishras all the time. In this particular rule set, though, as we're going to say, Mishras are a little bit weaker than, let's say, in Atlantic or EC or Swedish anyway. Golgothian Silex, my kind of answer to artifact heavy decks, has proved to be useful in many cases. Wrath of God is a card that I feel is underplayed, at least as a sideboard card. I understand that there are some creatures, again, such as Mishras, that cannot be destroyed using this card. There are some situations where your opponent is playing a creatureless deck, and we understand that in my deck I have got a lot of creatures actually. But very often, once again, the good thing about these symmetric cards is that you are the person who knows that this card is going to be cast, so you are actually prepared for it. So very often you can let your opponent overcommit to the board, and they will not expect the Wrath of God, especially in the second game if they haven't seen it in the first game. So this card saved me a couple of times. Then we have got the last copy of Disenchant and a couple of circles. There are 2 Circle of Protection Red, 2 Circles of Protection Black. The Circles of Protection Red saved me once against a mono-red deck. I understand how devastating this can be for the opponent. I have been in this particular situation myself, so no questions here. So now let's talk about the French rules. The French rules, as we currently played them in September, are the following. So first of all, tapped blockers do not deal damage. I think this is incredibly important for Mishras, because Mishras will only be 2/2 if you decide to block with them and deal damage. So they cannot be 3/3 and kill your creature with 3 toughness that is attacking. So this is definitely an improvement that many people would like to see. But on the other hand, the opponents of this rule say that it is not right to introduce more and more errata, because it's neither here nor there. Some people say that it's neither old school magic nor it is old school cards with modern rules, as for instance Swedish is in many ways. Of course there's the Chaos Orb errata and so, but other than that it works like that. Another one which is interesting, there is Paris Mulligan. This is probably going to be changed because there has been a debate already about that in the old school French community. So Paris Mulligan, if you don't remember the name itself, means that you just mulligan and take 1 card less. And that's it. There is no scry, there is no opportunity to look at some of the cards that you have got, look at 7 cards and put the number of the cards that you mulliganed equal to the number of times that you mulliganed to the bottom. So this is actually not a rule that favors, we can say, skill. Some people argue like that. Some people argue that this rule favors luck more than skill. But then again, this is something you should take into account. Some people say that the current London Mulligan favors combo decks. So there is that. Another one that they have got, but I'm not sure, maybe this is also a rule that became popular in other old school communities, is that they have got the falling star errata, so that you can choose, if I'm not mistaken, 2 cards, and basically you can deal damage to 2 creatures if you flip it properly, something like that. Yes, so once again, the most important differences are like this. And also, yes, also you can play Fallen Empires. That is important. You can play Fallen Empires in the French rules, under the French rules. And fortunately, even though when we say Fallen Empires, we usually mean Hymn to Torek and Pump Knights, I cannot say that I saw a plethora of these. So this was a nice addition. I saw a Goblin deck with the Goblin Grenade, which is a little bit more interesting than just the usual Hymn to Torek. So there is that. The community itself is nice. I have met some people who played interesting brews. Sometimes they were just so to say, archetypes. Some of them more budget, some of them less budget. Even the Goblins, that is an incredibly popular and well-known deck. I saw Goblins, I think 5-color Goblins with a really interesting twist. I saw an incredibly interesting experimental Channel Fireball deck. So I definitely recommend to look into that. I know that there are different communities of old school Magic, especially with the situation that we have got nowadays. More and more communities have started organizing matches on Skype, and you really don't have to live there. It's enough to speak the language very often, even the basic language. And I mean, if we talk about old school, obviously a lot of people understand basic English, even if they are not really fluent speakers of that language. So once again, I want to thank the tournament organizers. Probably I'm going to play some more tournaments with this particular community in the future. So that's what I can say. Erhnamgeddon deck, yes. French old school Magic, yes. A lot of different interesting things going on. It's just for you to explore and find out more about the communities around you, because it's not so easy to discover them, but the more you talk to people, the more you get to know other players from around the world, the more you will be aware of different events going on, different traditions, and different interesting decks and events. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for watching, and bye.